What's going on, everybody?
Hi, everybody. Long time no see.
Seriously, one might say has.
Been a while. I got it that time.
Yeah, you did get it that time.
That's gonna forever be a like a meme on this, you know.
For sure, we may have stolen that from another podcast, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Whatever. I'm claiming it. Sorry, Scott Ackerman.
Yeah.
Anyways, all right. So, Rob, how you doing?
Good. It's been a while. You guys haven't seen us do this since probably early November, so it's been a couple months. So apologies for that, but we've been pretty busy. I know I've been busy. I've moved, holidays, all that. So apologies for not getting this out for about a month and a half or so, but check out the videos that we just did on our channel. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Despite not recording together, and as Rob said, life, holidays, blah, 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 did not move. But, I know we did say, I feel like we've done this spiel before where we record, long period, and like, hey, we're back. Sorry, it's been a while. I was like, guys, we're trying, we're plowing through. We are, now that we're in the new year, we want to go back and maintain this podcast as being a monthly thing. So this is episode 3. But yes, as Rob alluded, we have been plugging away solo. The Beatles broke up and went solo. We didn't break up.
Yeah.
Then the band comes back together. Anyways, check out my video about 2 weeks ago. I uploaded my top 20 favorite albums released in 2023. And then my co-host here just recently did a top 10 favorite Led Zeppelin songs of all time. I just watched that video yesterday. Phenomenal as always. And I have to say, a few surprises there. Other than your number one.
Yeah.
Our number one is the same.
Yeah,
I'm not going to tell you what that is. Go watch the video.
And I did not do a top albums of 2023 because I did not listen to nearly enough albums that were released in 2023. So hopefully this next year I can remedy that and have my own list. So
we can do a top 2024, and we can even do first half of the decade. Just saying, but
that'd be cool.
You'll have to stay tuned if that video happens or not.
Eventually.
Anyways, before we get started, if you've been watching or listening, always forget about you listeners. First 2 episodes of Talkin MuzaK, we ended episode 2. Advertising episode 3 going to be all things krautrock. That's going to be episode 4 now.
Yep.
Now that Rob and I are back in the swing of things again, we do need that time to do the research, and we want to do that episode to the best that we can.
Yeah.
And so we did decide to do something else instead. We'll talk about in a second. And 4th episode will be krautrock.
We tend to get a little over ambitious, and that's one I think that you and I have been wanting to do for a long time in some form. And I feel I don't know about you. I want to do it right, And I've been I still have been listening to quite a bit of krautrock, not as much as I did on Krautrock November, which I hope you all did. But I have done some research and whatnot, but I really want to do that justice, and I know you do as well. So it's be patient with us. It will hopefully be episode 4. That's what I'm gonna say. It will hopefully be episode 4. That's the plan, but we'll see how it goes.
So funny. I was just thinking the other day, we're going on almost 5 years doing this YouTube channel and that podcast together, and guys, we're still figuring it out. So by the 10-year anniversary, we are gonna be pros.
Yeah, I do another channel. I do a gaming channel, and I've been doing it for 7 years, and it's the same thing. It's like always trying new things, always trying to be consistent, And when you do it as a side hobby, people, we don't get paid for this. We don't. We both have jobs and wives, and I have children, and everything, and so it's a side hobby, and we really enjoy doing it, and I think we want to do it well, and if we want to do it, we want to be 100%. We don't want to half-ass it. At least I know. Well, I can comfortably speak for both of us there. We want to do a good job, so it's just a matter of time these days, right?
These days, but we're getting there. But I do want to give one last shout out to the viewers that we do have. I don't know if you've noticed, Rob, but a lot of our videos have been blowing up. Your frog video, specifically your top 25, has gotten a lot of love. I think there's over 32K views on that video at this point. So
it's 52.
I just want to say, you know, for those of us that have, for those of you rather, it's been a long day. Those of you that have been following, subscribed, whatever it may be, we do appreciate this.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. We're also sitting at we're very close to, you know, having enough money to, or having enough subscribers and stuff to monetize on YouTube, which is pretty awesome. So it'd be cool if we could do that, get us that extra little push, and you know, hopefully we keep building this up and you guys enjoy the podcast. And you know, if we know there's a lot of people watching, it's going to be even more incentive for us to want to do this. So, you know, appreciate all the support, everybody. Everybody's been really cool. A lot of nice comments. So
absolutely. And before we reveal today's episode and get started, brought back this tradition last episode to only leave me hanging for this episode. Drink of choice.
What you got there?
I'm about to try this for the first time. We have the Dogfish Head citrus.
Ooh, nice. Yeah. I like the Dogfish Head. Yeah, that sounds good. I've been off of work for a week, and I told Andy just before that I've been basically an alcoholic this week, so I'm taking the night off. But if I were to have a drink, there's this cider that's made in Ontario that is phenomenal that Rachel and I have been just addicted to, and it's called Growers, and they make this really, really good Honeycrisp apple cider, and they make a couple of other fruits. They have like a Bartlett pear, they have like a mixed fruit one, they have a berry one. They're really, really good. That's what I'd be drinking right now. So
nice. I will have to try that when I eventually come up.
When you come up and visit, we'll do a live Talkin MuzaK episode, and we will drink some Growers. So there you go. Look for that in a future episode.
Robbie, introduce what we're doing, what we're talking about.
Well, this was actually all Andy's idea, and I applaud you for this idea, because it was just like, let's do something somewhat easy that, you know, it'll be fun to discuss, and it'll be less sort of labor intensive and less preparation than the Krautrock episode. So you had a brilliant idea to just talk about basically how we listen to music, the way, like, you know, there's from basically the phonograph record to like on, there's been many ways to listen to music, and you know, now more than ever there's more ways to listen to music, more convenient ways to listen to music. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, our sort of preferred ways that we listen to music. And then to go along with that, because we're both vinyl junkies, we're going to do a top 5, which we'll get into very soon, about our records we're most proud that we own. And then we're going to do a little record roulette, which I don't know if we've done that yet on the previous 2 episodes. I don't think we have.
Not on the podcast, but we did a separate record roulette.
We did for those, you can check out the video on YouTube. We did this segment called Record Roulette, where we each picked 5 records randomly from our collection, and then we just had to talk about it on the fly. For the sake of time for this podcast, we're each going to do 3, and it's going to be all random. So, yeah. So that's basically the format of this. And I just really quick want to plug one of the things we were talking about with the last episode, how there's been a gap. I forgot to mention that I moved, so you may notice that I've got a brand new setup here, which I'm like super happy with. I just this weekend, actually a couple days ago, set this portion of my room up, which is all the music stuff. Got my bass here. I got my big speakers, that my old ones hooked with my record player right over here. And I even got this nifty little thing from a place called Value Village, because I needed a receiver for my record player. And this even has an iPod dock on it, so I thought that was kind of cool. So I got this whole setup ready to go. And then on this side I've got, I just want to show it off quick. The reason this old TV is here, this is for my other channel. So for when I record my video game stuff. But I just want to say I'm like super pumped about this setup, and yeah, this is probably what you guys are going to be seeing from now on when we're doing the podcast. So yeah,
it's a cool setup, man. I have to point out really fast that seeing Diamond Dogs brought me back memory lane and made me think of that episode when we had that ridiculous intro. What is it, Future Islands, that opener?
Yeah,
we very much got into that. And that was Diamond Dogs 2.0. If you also recall, we had to re-record that episode.
Yes, we had to re-record it. And it happens to be my favorite Bowie album, so I will display it proudly here. So, got a little Beatles back there, got some Rush up top, Grace Under Pressure. So, you know, gotta bust out all the good stuff. Anyway, just that's kind of the updates for us. And do we want to start out with just a quick little bit of heavy rotation? What have you been listening to lately?
Heavy rotation, let's do it, man. So first and foremost, I've been really on a big Alice Coltrane kick lately. I just recently purchased her record, Journey to Seko and Donda. I always butcher that name. On vinyl not too long ago, and I've just been going down the rabbit hole of all things Alice Coltrane. I did not realize that she did a record in the mid-70s, 74, 75, with Carlos Santana, of all people. So that was an interesting record. It was kind of like one of those records. Have you ever, like, something comes to mind, like Captain Beefheart and Frank Zappa, collaboration albums where two geniuses do a record together, and it's just mediocre.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why that is, I don't know. Maybe that's a discussion for another day, but that's how I felt about that record. But I've just been her late 60s to about her mid to late 70s output. I've had a heavy rotation. Capping off my 2023 top 20, I've been really revisiting Sufjan Stevens' catalog. His record, Javelin, was my number 4, I believe, for 2023. And he goes back all the way to the early 2000s. He has so many incredible records, and it's been a trip, but in a good way, revisiting his back catalog. I've also been on a big Elliott Smith kick lately as well. A while back, a mutual friend of ours, Kevin, send us a text, something along the lines of Andy Elliott Smith is so much better than Bob Dylan. And while I politely disagreed in terms of songwriting, funny enough, I'm actually a bigger Elliott Smith fan than a Bob Dylan fan.
That's funny.
So, not an Elliott Smith kick. And the new Smile record came out on Friday. Tom York and Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead, of course, their side project. They're really into that album. And I've been on a Fela Kuti kick as well, too. For some reason, there is a like coming up on my screen. With the effect.
I know, what is with that? The balloons? Yeah, the balloons were great last time, yeah.
I do like this album, I have to admit. There you go.
There it is. It's a little creepy, actually, but I do like it.
For real, keep it in.
Yeah, that is not something I added in post, people. That's all Andy's phone I think you're on, so.
Magic, yeah. So I've been on a big Fela Kuti kick as well, too, and he's always just a blast to listen to. And there's a few other artists. Wilco, as always, I feel like I name drop them every opportunity I can. Specifically, I've been on a Wilco bootleg kick lately, so listening to various live stuff from various tours, that's been a lot of fun. But that's about it, man. What about you?
Well, I mentioned that video. I've been in a big Zeppelin mood, so I haven't listened to them just consistently in quite a long time, actually. Like, you know, maybe a song here or there, or whatever. But I basically went through their discography, and really, like, was really fun revisiting them. Like, I don't know, I'm not always in a Zeppelin mood, but when it strikes, it's like, it's really good. You know, they're one of those bands for me. And recently, I've actually been today, actually, like, if you want really new, I was listening to some T-Rex and just kind of trying to explore some more, you know, 70s glam rock, which I love. And I don't listen to as much as I used to. So, like, I was listening today to the New York Dolls album, Too Much Too Soon. That one's really good. I haven't listened to that in a while. What else? I was listening to a little Mott the Hoople as well. So, like, sort of the glam rock era. I want to listen to Roxy Music and maybe start listening to, I think you said, is it Eno's first album is kind of more in the vein of, like, sort of what he was doing in Roxy Music, or is it, like...
Yeah. To a degree, yeah. Here Come the Warm Jets. I would even say his first 2 solo records, Here Come the Warm Jets and Taking Tiger Mountain.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. You know, I've always really been a big fan of that stuff, like especially T-Rex and this guy, and you know, but like I kind of want to start deep diving that a little more, because there was a lot of bands from that era within that scene that I just haven't explored. You know, band like The Sweet. You know, I know a couple of the hits, but I'd love to hear more of their stuff. You know, also recently, like the band Slade. They're another really cool kind of heavier sort of glam band that's really neat. Otherwise, still listen to some krautrock here and there. That's like a huge well that I still feel like not even close to reaching the bottom of that. There's so many bands that I barely heard or not heard a lot of. I noticed the one day you sent me. You must have listened to. I always screw up the title of this.
Iggy Bombasset.
Yeah, that from Can. I listened to that recently as well, and that's a great album. I don't know. I feel like you're much better with the newer music, where I discovering new old music all the time. I'm trying to think of other bands. Oh, I watched I think I posted this in our little group chat. I watched a Elton John concert, his very last one. The one at Dodger Stadium. I have not seen. I don't know why I was under the impression with Elton John that I don't know if somebody said his voice was shot or something. I was like, oh, I just heard he wasn't good live, and for some reason, I was randomly on Disney Plus and I played that, and Rachel and I watched the whole concert. I was totally blown away. His band is amazing. He still sounds amazing. He doesn't sound like he did in the 70s, but his last concert was just so excellent. And then so it got me listening to his stuff again, a lot of his classic albums. And I'm a big Elton John fan, especially, he had a ton of stuff in the 70s, but basically everything I've heard of his I really like. So been kind of getting back into him,
He's great. He has a... Oh, I'm sorry.
No, no, I'm good. Go ahead.
I was going to say, he's great. He's got a run of classic records from the 70s, and he's someone I would say there's very few musicians where I feel like this applies, where it's not that his voice doesn't sound as good as it used to necessarily, it's that it just matured, and I feel like in many ways it's in his favor. He just sings at a lower register now compared to some of the more higher falsetto type of singing he did in the 70s, and I guess to a degree to the 80s. But I gotta say, it sounds great, and it kind of brings out different interpretations in some of his older material.
He's there was a lot I didn't know about him. It was one of those things where you just randomly there's an artist like that's always been on your radar, but you never dove into. And I've always been an Elton John fan, but I never dove into Elton John. And now I am, and I did a lot of the musicians that were with him been with him since practically the beginning. His band is so good. He is so good. As a piano player, he's amazing. And I completely agree with what you said with his vocals. He almost became a different singer, but you're right, it works in his favor. All of the old material that he did sounded great. He did my favorite Elton John song, which is Love Lies Bleeding. I love that song.
Great song.
And he did that whole thing. He sounded awesome. Just an incredible performer. And he's one of those guys from that era that somehow still has it. A lot of them have lost it or are sadly no longer with us, but he still has it. And I even researched. I was like, because you know how it is now. This could be a whole discussion video we do about the whole backing track thing. And I was like, does he sound too good? So I was researching. It's like, nope, there is no evidence. Nobody talks about him doing any kind of lip syncing or anything like that. So kudos to Elton John. He's even been very critical of it. So kudos to Elton John. He's a legend, and he's just. I was just so impressed with that final concert, and then I was kicking myself that I didn't go see him live. Since he's pretty much
my brother and my mom caught him on that last tour a couple years ago.
Yeah, he was incredible. So that's some of the stuff I've been listening to. Like I said, Andy, I'm always listening to new music, but it's usually new old music, and that's not intentional. I'm always open to newer music, but it's just I always go back to I love my 70s stuff. So there you go.
I get it, man. I'm always discovering new old music as well, and new music, of course. It's always ongoing.
Speaking of old music, shall we? Well, I guess this doesn't necessarily apply solely to old music, but shall we move to our top fives?
Do it. So, do you want to recap what we're doing for the top five?
So, for the top fives, it's top 5 albums. This was also your idea that we're most proud to own. So, I think what we'll do is. Mine are in no particular order. Are yours or no?
I just did it chronological order.
Okay, I'm just gonna. We can just do. I'll do a 5. You do 5, and then I don't have to go first, but one of us goes, and then we'll switch off and we'll do our top 5.
All right, if you want, I can go first.
Go for it. What's your
All
number
right,
5?
so 5. I don't know, by the way, how you approach this necessarily. I try to do different reasons for each of my picks, whether it's value or personal or even some of which are funny. Interesting enough, I'll say really quick, going back to Led Zeppelin, I almost went with Physical Graffiti as one of my
Nice.
choices. One, because it was the first record on vinyl I ever purchased, but two, I have a really ridiculous story that I'll have to tell you off camera, which is not appropriate to tell on this podcast. So,
Okay.
not my top five.
I'm gonna bug you about that afterwards then. Okay.
And I'll leave it at that.
Before you do your 5, I just want to say I took a similar approach because I don't have really any super rare records or anything like that. So it was basically just 5 records that I'm really happy to own. You know, maybe were hard to find, personal value, whatever. So go ahead.
This warning could cause a clear. We'll find out right now. So for my first pick, I did say I went chronological order release-wise for my top 5, so this is not a ranking by any means. But the first one I went is a record from 1968, self-titled Silver Apples record.
Ooh, can you just tilt it a bit? I love the silver.
Yeah, look at the marble vinyl. So this is a repress, of course.
I was gonna ask you. Oh my god, I love that.
Isn't that wonderful? Yeah, beautiful. So Silver Apples, this band was way ahead of their time. So this is a 2-piece band, drum and just synthesizers and oscillators of the whole thing.
Wow, interesting.
Covered this record a couple years ago. Spoiler, it could appear in my next video. Anyways, been on my Discogs wish list for quite some time, and my wife and I last summer we went to this punk rock flea market in Philadelphia, 100 degrees.
I remember you sending pictures of this.
Yeah, and this was one of the records, and so I really wanted to take the opportunity to really go for niche, difficult stuff, and I could not believe I found this record. There was a couple great records I found, but I wasn't leaving without this one. And funny enough, I was talking to the guy that was working the stand. Really cool guy. We were geeking out over The Fall, Gang of Four, Silver Apples. And at one point he goes, "Listen, man, it's been a long day. I really have to use the bathroom. Can you please watch my stand?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, I got you."
That's awesome.
So I just hung out there with my records. He comes back and he goes, "For doing that, I'm going to give you a discount." And this was one of the records that he discounted. And even this repress is really hard to come by. Wow. And the fact that he did me a solid just because I did a kind gesture for him really meant a lot. This is a record I did not think I would have in my collection anytime soon. I love it. It's so weird. A lot of krautrock are very influenced by this record. You would like it. You would really like it.
Yeah, it sounds like my kind of thing. I'm gonna have to check that out. It's
really arty. It's really out there, and it's just ahead of its time.
68.
Silver Apples.
68.
1968.
Okay, 68. Yep. Okay, I'll check that out for sure. That sounds up my alley.
Love this album.
Okay, my number 5 is this is just a fairly recent acquisition, and I'll just talk about it. It's of course got some prog rock. Vandergraaf Generator, Pawn Hearts.
Great record.
One difference we might have a little bit is I have a couple of reissues that I'll talk about, but most of my vinyls are vintage, and it's just a personal preference. There's obviously some records you can't get vintage because they were released much later, right? But this was Vandergraaf Generator, Pawn Hearts. I wouldn't talk about this one because this is just one of those records that I did not think I would ever find in the wild, and I found it. I found it at Factory Records, shout out to them in Dover, New Jersey. Going there, and so it was between that record store, man, screws me up sometimes because I was holding this and Sabotage by Black Sabbath, and more on them in a minute. But Black Sabbath vintage vinyl is very difficult to find. I don't know if you've found this. I've tried looking for it so many times, rarely see it in like out in the wild. I think it's just one of those things. A lot of heavy. I mean, I think it's just maybe because heavy metal has that huge following and people just aren't giving up their albums. I don't know, but this to me. I was like, when I saw it, I was like, there's no way I'm gonna find this somewhere else. I've never seen it anywhere else. So Vandergraaf, this costs a pretty penny. I also just happened to be listening to them at the time, so I was really excited about it. Good gatefold's really nice. It's in real good
That's
shape.
cool gatefold.
What's the 72? So yeah, I don't think it's a first pressing, but it is like
I was just about to ask you that.
from that same year or around that time. So yeah, I just was really, really excited to pick this up, and it was just one of those albums where I was like, oh my god, I can't believe I got this, you know? Like, I just can't believe it. So I had to, basically, I don't know, I just had to include it. It's one of my most recent acquisitions.
Well, man, that's awesome. Great choice.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I think you made the right call putting Sabotage down.
Yeah, it was
Which is a
very
great Black Sabbath record, by the way. I love that.
Yeah,
record.
It was a very difficult decision, but I was like, I gotta get that.
All right, so my next record. This is someone I've talked about a lot on the channel. This record specifically, released in 1969, Karma by Pharoah Sanders.
Nice.
So,
Love that album.
So this album, it goes for on Discogs as far as first pressings, original pressings, whatever. This was one. If it was ever going to be in my collection, it was going to be a repress. But I'm really happy that I came across with this repress. So this is specifically, so this record was released on Impulse Records. This reissue was done by Acoustic Sounds, who are known specifically for their reissues in terms of sound quality. I think I've said this to you before off camera. This is the best sounding record in my collection. And when they first announced the reissue a couple years ago, seeing prices, I was like, I'm never going to own this album on vinyl. I have a CD copy of it, and I pretty recently, I forget which record store I was at, came across it at a pretty reasonable price. And it's just another instance, I'm walking out with this record. This album means so much to me. It was very vital and my jazz journey, getting into jazz. I mean, he played with Coltrane towards the end of Coltrane's career, and very much in many ways is the spiritual successor to John Coltrane. And this is just one of those albums. It's fitting to have it on vinyl because this is one of those albums, and we'll talk about this in the main discussion, where I listen to this record. I don't do anything else. I just immerse myself because that's how this album should be listened. In my opinion, and the sound quality on this, I just can't emphasize enough. So the record means a lot to me. I'm proud to have it in my collection. I'm very privileged to have this specific reissue.
Nice.
That's my number 4.
Very nice.
Love that record.
So another vintage one for me, and I cannot believe I found this vintage. So I don't know for sure how hard it is to get this band's stuff on vinyl vintage. I've seen a few of their other albums, but this one I was so happy to get because it's my favorite album by them. And it's also of the genre the only album I have on vinyl. So it is Phaedra by Tangerine Dream.
Great album.
And I found this at a pawn shop when I was in Canada. So it was well, I mean, I live in Canada now, but we were visiting my friend James over in the Kingston side, and we went in this little pawn shop, and I'm looking through. And all of these, it was all like, you know, Neil Diamond, that kind of thing. I'm like, I'm not going to find anything. You know, like just kind of a lot of those, you know, those records that you see an abundance of that I guess people bought tons of and then nobody wants now. You know, Sesame Street and what have you. Anyway, and then I look and I'm like, that's Phaedra. Holy shit, you know? And then look at the price tag. I don't know if you can see if it'll focus. Anyway, it's $7.99.
Wow.
So like this, it's in great shape. I'm not sure about the pressing. It's from 1977, but it looks great, man. Got another gatefold, another sort of gatefold there. and it's my only krautrock album. And this was probably this is a special record to me because it's probably the album that got me into electronic music, and particularly that side of krautrock. So to find it vintage randomly at a pawn shop, that's just one of those things where, you know, I don't know. It's like you're in the right place at the right time, you know? So it's like I don't know if they didn't know what they were getting rid of or if this is more common than I think it is, but I've never seen it since. So I'm very, very pleased to own this. Awesome record.
Makes you wonder if it's one of those instances.
On vinyl, by the way. Sorry?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I was just going to say, it makes you wonder if it's one of those instances someone else's junk is now your treasure.
Yeah. Who knows?
Awesome, man. That's a great record. I love that Tangerine Dream album.
Yeah, it's fantastic. What you got?
So, my third choice, for jumping ahead to 1971. This is a record that our mutual friend Dan got me into a long time ago. I'm pretty sure this is one collectively we all love. Maggot Brain.
Oh, nice.
Funkadelic, hey?
Little teaser
P-Funk.
with the shirt. That's a great album, too, the one on your shirt.
P-Funk.
Really good.
Yes, it is. Mothership Connection. This is one of those albums. So I'm not as iffy as you and Dan with the vintage, older pressing stuff as you guys are. This is one of those records I just wholeheartedly accepted. I will never come across an original copy of this. But with that being said, this is a hard one, even the reissue to find. Funkadelic recently, a couple of years ago, put out, reissued rather, all of their records. And I have the first two on vinyl, and I would come across them periodically. Some of their other post-Maggot Brain albums as well, too. But never this record. And one of my local record stores, I don't even want to shout them out, but it's one of my local record stores. Cass and I were just there one day, and it was there. I think it was 1999.
Very
nothing
nice.
Extreme or anything, and it's just another instance where I'm walking out with this because when am I gonna come across this?
Oh, absolutely.
And I have not ever. I love this record. This is just another one that, I mean, it's on heavy rotation. I listen to it minimum once a month. That's how much this ends up being on my turntable, and it's just a classic, man. I mean, if you have not listened to this record,
it's probably the greatest funk album ever made. You know,
make better choices if you have not listened to this album before.
And one of the best guitar pieces I think ever.
Oh my God, Eddie Hazel. That's a whole story in of itself.
Yeah, and by the way, to your point, I'm not. I hope I'm not coming across as snob. I'm actually about to talk about a reissue. I will get reissues for sure. Sometimes you have to, and I also accept that there's stuff I'll never find in the wild that I'll have to get even older stuff. You know,
you have to as a record collector. Yeah. You really do.
Like we've talked, unless short of going to Germany maybe and going to a record store, I'm probably not going to be getting too much other vintage krautrock if I want it. So as much as I'd love to. So speaking of reissues and a reissue of an older album, this was a gift from again, we've mentioned him a couple times, Dan. So thank you, Dan. This is first of these I'll talk about. This is UFO, Strangers in the Night, one of the greatest live records by it in the 70s, in my opinion, especially hard rock. I was looking for this album everywhere. I couldn't find it. Just couldn't find it. And then I forget what the occasion was, my birthday or something. I believe, Dan came up to visit me and he's like, hey, I got you something. And it was Strangers in the Night. So that was just like a really cool surprise. I really liked it. Love this record. Sounds great. I think this is the 2022 reissue? 2020? It was very recent. I think it's 2022. Please flame me in the comments if I'm wrong, you UFO aficionados. But yeah, I mean, it's awesome. Like, just the whole presentation is lovely. No, it's not a colored vinyl, but it's still really cool. Anyway, not much of a story, I guess, but it was just a really cool gesture by Dan, since he knew I was really looking for it, so I want to just put it's a little bit special for that reason. And it sounds fucking awesome. Cool. It just sounds so good on record, so it's been this recently.
That's awesome. I mean, like you said, there's the personal connection, and that's, that's going to be one of my picks coming up as well too. So that you don't need to justify it as far as it not being special, because that makes it special. I don't know that UFO record. I have to admit I don't know too much of their discography. I know a couple songs, of course. But
that's if you want, like, if you're ever in a mood where you just want to try, like, explore like a good rockin' live album, there's a reason that one is put on such a pedestal. Because I even thought, I'm like, oh man, so many people talk about this, like, is it as great as it is? And then I'm listening, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, it is. Like, the guitar is really fantastic, and just so much energy. I don't know what happened. I don't know what was so special about that performance, but it's really, really good. A lot of raw energy. So
nice. The band must have been in sync that night.
Yep.
All right, so my number 4. This is kind of an interesting one. So now we're going to 1973. Todd Rundgren. I just hit myself. A Wizard, a True Star.
Love that album and the cover. And, you got the blue vinyl. Oh, that's what I like to see.
Blue vinyl. Ooh. So you're familiar with this record?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
I know Todd Rundgren fairly well. Saw him live, actually. But anyway, go ahead, sorry.
This is their record. This is your mid-60s Beach Boys, latter half Beatles, but just to like the next level as far as just sonically goes, let alone the songwriting and just the amount of experimentation on this record. This was a Factory Records purchase. Shout out to them again. This record, before purchasing it, was just kind of getting into, and I wasn't really at that place where I wasn't sure if I was loving it yet. And reading up on this record, one of the things I came across is it's not recommended. Here we are talking about original pressings. It's not recommended to get this album on an original pressing or even any 70s pressing. The reason why for that is this exceeds the vinyl format. This is roughly a 55-minute album. Your average vinyl side is usually in the 20 to 23 range. Mm-hmm. And so this barely made that on a single record. So what happens with that is records that really push the limit as far as how much it can fit, it's just going to wear out. It's going to warp a lot sooner than your average record. So and I would always come across used copies of this. Todd Rundgren albums are usually fine on vinyl. But because of that, it's like, well, I'm not invest in an old copy. So I came across this. This is kind of a risk purchase, even though I was just getting into this album and, being on the fence of how I felt about it. This was the most expensive record I bought on vinyl, and I just went with a gut feeling, man. I said, I've really been trying to understand this album, and I think I got to take a chance. I think the only way I'm gonna get it and really appreciate it is if I make this purchase, and I'm glad I did. It's on 2 discs, two records, and it sounds phenomenal. It's so good. This record is so zany, so out there. I'm glad I made the risk. It was an expensive risk indeed, but it paid off.
He had a very interesting career, didn't he? Like, he went all over the place, and as a producer, he's one of the best. Very underrated, Todd Rundgren.
Very underrated, and his producing career, that should be a separate conversation altogether.
Of course, yeah. Okay, another recent, actually, probably my most recent. Actually, no, technically not, because I got a record the other day. One of my most recent ones again. Again, a shout out to you, Dan, because he gave me this last time I saw him. Black Sabbath's first album, Vintage.
Nice.
Which he found at a different record store that I want to go with him to. Somewhere in New Jersey, I don't know. I have never, ever, ever seen this in the wild. I have a hard time finding Sabbath. And then he surprised me with this last time I came to visit in New Jersey. And I listened to it actually just yesterday, I think. Sounds so good on vinyl. Just dirty, murky, and it's like, oh man, it was made to be heard on vinyl. And yeah, just coupled with, the fact that it was a gift and also that it's so hard to find. Yeah, just amazing. One of the best debut albums. Love this album. Such a weird album cover too, and it's in great shape. I don't know. I was very shocked. I was like, no way, you know, when he pulled it out, because I've never, again, it's one of those ones, I've just never seen it out in the wild ever. I mean, I don't, there's most Sabbath, I think the only Sabbath I've seen out in the wild is, that's not a reissue, is Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, which I saw years ago and didn't buy because I'm a dummy, and then recently when I saw Sabotage, that's it. I don't know why they're so hard to find, but this was something I just figured, like, going back to that other conversation, it's like, well, if I ever want the debut, I'll just have to get it on reissue. So now I don't, so it's awesome, you know. And I know, by the way, quality is, like, it's probably, if you get the reissue, particularly, I think they reissued this album plus, like, most of the catalog very recently, and I'm sure it sounds amazing. It probably sounds better than it, but something about owning, I like old stuff, you know, what can I say? Old books, old records, you know, old games.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it just depends. I mean, it can go either way. I mean, it's very common for reissues to not sound as good as original pressings simply because records, you know, back during that time period, something like Black Sabbath, they're directly from the master tape. So more often than not, most reissues tend to be digital remasters. Mm-hmm. Not always the case, but sometimes it is. So that can be up for debate a little bit as far as a reissue versus an older pressing sounding better or worse. But again, that's a discussion for another time. Mm-hmm. My last record is my only vintage copy. This was back during when I was buying records, specifically my favorite albums, before actually listening to them. I mentioned Physical Graffiti. I was like 19 or 20 when I bought that. Didn't listen to it for like another decade. Still was buying CDs back then. But when I came across this album on vinyl, 2015, 2016-ish, I had to get it.
Ooh, nice.
1974, On the Beach, Neil Young. The reason why, and I don't know if this is a first pressing, I do know this was a 1974 issue. I meant to double check on Discogs, but I didn't. Anyways, the reason why it's so special for me to have this on vinyl, other than it's always been my favorite Neil Young album, is back early internet days, the mid-2000s, the forum days, the early RYM days, when I was getting into Neil Young, I came across this album, like, I don't know this album. I've never seen this album on CD in music stores. Everything else but this. And the reason why that was because, so when CDs first started becoming a thing in the 80s, Neil Young did not initially release this album on CD. This album didn't even get a CD release till 2003.
Wow.
So I was able, and even at the time, it was hard to find a CD copy. I forget where I came across my CD copy, but I got that first, of course. And I don't know, there was just always like this mythology around this record. Like, oh, this is a hard one to find, but it's like, it's so good. It doesn't sound anything like you've heard from Neil Young before. And while it's a bit exaggerated, there is truth to that as well, too. And so I immediately fell in love with this album. It's the first time I listened to it on CD. Like I said, it's remained my favorite Neil record to this day, and Neil's a guy that I firmly believe has two perfect records. Nothing that I could say is a flaw, and that's this and After the Gold Rush. I can't say that about too many artists. So I found this on vinyl, and even though I wasn't listening to records at the time, didn't even own a record player, this album just means so much to me. So much to me. The amount of personal attachment that I have to this record, we would be here all night just talking about why that is. So I had to get it, even if just having it, just like, hey, I have this on vinyl. Yeah. I don't know what else to say. This is still a hard one to find to this day. It has been reissued on vinyl, so you can find vinyl reissues of this, but this is an original, baby, and it's overall in pretty good condition. It sounds great, and it just this album just means so much to me.
I saw that recently at Factory. They wanted $50 for it.
I believe it.
It was also a vintage copy, but yeah, that's awesome that you have that. It's cool.
I'm so proud to have this.
Do you remember what you paid for it at the time?
I don't, to be honest. It definitely wasn't $50.
Yeah.
I can tell you that much.
It was
but
probably
I don't.
before vinyl really had its big resurgence. I would bet.
It was just before, and I
Yeah.
remember I was going to give it a shout out as well, but I chose not to. I bought this the same day I bought Low by David Bowie on vinyl.
Oh, nice.
Which you know is another personal favorite
of
mine.
Course.
So, yeah, man.
My last one's a reissue, also fairly recent. It's weird. A lot of these are fairly recent acquisitions. I don't know why. This was a gift from my wife, and I just kind of showed this off. Ozric Tentacles. Love this band. I want to own. They recently reissued like a bunch of their classic albums, all on different colored vinyl, and I eventually want to get them all. I wanted to get this one, and thank you, Rachel, if you ever watch this, because look at these, man. So cool. I love these. This isn't even necessary. This is maybe like top 5 Ozrics for me, I'd say. So it's not even, it's not even my favorite record, but I just love what they did with it, and it sounds great, and it was pretty expensive. I think it's a limited edition, and yeah, I just saw it and I was like, I gotta get this, and then Rachel's like, well, I owe you a birthday present, so there you go. Look at that cover, man. It's so good.
It's cool album
The
cover.
Floor's Too Far Away. This is one you smoke a big fat doob and listen to. Just let it take you away. Some amazing space rock if you don't know Ozric Tentacles. Very underrated band. So there you go. This one's just special because I think it's really cool and my wife gave it to me, so.
Yeah, of course.
There you go.
That's awesome, man. I checked them out maybe 10 years ago. And I remember not being able to get into it at the time, but maybe I'm due to give them another go.
I mean, given how much you've gotten into krautrock and other sort of, like, I mean, they're basically instrumental. You mix electronic, space rock, some krautrockiness, some prog. That's basically Ozric's. So you'd actually, you should listen. There's a bootleg of theirs that's amazing. It's really, really good. Yeah, it's actually my favorite thing by them, which we'll talk about another time. But maybe we could do like a bootleg episode or something. But yeah, they're really good. They've become one of my favorites over the years.
Nice. So do you want to go ahead and transition to the main
move on to our discussion
of this episode? So this was a suggestion I had as well too. This is just something when we talk about music, I'm just really passionate about myself, and that is how we listen to music. Now, I don't know about you, but there isn't one specific way necessarily. There are, as a matter of fact, multiple different ways as to how I listen to music, and that could be just in terms of mood, that could be just in terms of convenience sometimes, that can be sometimes I just want it on for background, you name it. But I do think that, here we are talking about vinyl records, and record collecting is not only time consuming, but it's also an investment.
Yeah.
So, having said that, first and foremost, when I listen to anything on vinyl, I'm not doing anything else. I'm not near my devices. I keep my phone and my iPad separate. Sometimes I might have my iPad to follow lyrics if I don't have a lyric sheet, if it's like an older record or something. But typically I make it a point to do nothing else but just listen to music. I am preferably a headphone person. I do have a speaker setup that I need to hook up, a really killer speaker setup actually. But headphones have just always been my preferred way of listening to my music. I have been an AKG user for better part of 15 years now, and they are budget studio quality headphones. And there's just something about with vinyl specifically when you're just immersing yourself into the music. I find it not only cathartic, but I find it really therapeutic. But also, I kind of, I kind of feel proud of myself in that in this digital day and age that we live in, we have become such an ADHD culture, myself included,
Yeah.
where it's tasking, we're doing this thing and we're doing that thing, and sometimes you just have to sit back and just be in here. And I love being in here when I'm listening to music. I find that some of my best ideas come out of just immersing myself into a record, whether that may be an idea for this channel and podcast or something work related or just a personal goal that I am working towards. But there's also the intimacy of just having the headphones on and just sinking yourself into the music. I'm sounding so pretentious at this point, but these are just genuine feelings that I have when I'm listening to a record. I'm curious, before I talk about some other ways I do listen to music, what's your take on that? Do you relate to that? When we're strictly talking vinyl records, before we talk about other music mediums, how do you go about that experience?
Well, with vinyl,
I'm curious.
With vinyl, it's been very rare that I've actually listened with headphones, only because of my setup. But these big bastards I've had for several years, these huge ass speakers. I actually had a second set of speakers that I had on top of them, and they're so loud and so big and bass heavy, and just like the sound just fills the room, that I don't really, it's almost like wearing headphones, because like if I'm listening to vinyl, I'm listening on these and I'm listening to it loud, and that it doesn't matter if it's something like a heavier band or if it's something light. It doesn't matter. I want to hear it loud. I want to hear the crackles. I want to hear everything. And I agree with you. There's something about vinyl that's really immersive, and it also can be kind of nostalgic, but like it's got this sort of warm sound to it that you don't get in pretty much any other medium. And now, like, my record player is also very old. I do the vintage vinyl thing for the most part, so it's all got this kind of like ancient quality to it that I can't really, express well in words. But I agree with you on the whole, like, we may listen to vinyl a little differently, but the sentiment's the same. Like, I want to immerse myself in it. I try not to, like, if I am doing something, it's going to be like mundane tasks that require no brain, like doing the dishes or something, like no brain activity whatsoever aside from listening to the music. But yeah, it's one of the ultimate ways of immersing yourself, and I really enjoy it. I really think if you're going to hear especially older records the way they were meant to be heard, you got to hear it on vinyl, whether it's reissue or whatever. But it was originally intended for vinyl, so you got to hear it kind of in the medium that it was meant for, to really hear the record for the first time. And there's times where I've listened to stuff on the record and I've heard it differently, or I've noticed different things than I have listening to a CD or streaming it, whatever. And I don't know. I'm totally with you there. With headphones, I think the reason maybe I don't, first of all, the last time I set this up, I didn't have a setup where I could listen to it with headphones, just because of my receiver. So that's one reason. I do have, this old record player has a headphone input, but it's one of the really big fat ones, and I don't have that. This does, so maybe I'll start doing that a little bit more. But I don't know. I love records. I love the whole experience. I love everything from putting the needle down to flipping the record over. Sometimes, like, for example, I haven't listened to records in a little while now since I set this back up. And then, I'm listening to records like, oh yeah, I gotta go flip it over. I'm like, why is it not? Oh yeah, I gotta, because you get used to streaming, right? Which I'm sure we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, and you made a really good point about, the whole, in the kind of the whole ADHD sort of society we live in, yeah, it does force you to sit down and actually listen to the thing. And there's also just the matter of, the point of it being, when you're listening to it on vinyl, it's become a physical medium again. You're holding something. You can look inside at the album while you're listening. You can, some of them come with lyric sheets. You can read along with the lyrics. You can really dive into records. So you can't really get that same experience with pretty much any other medium. And I would include CDs. CDs maybe a little more so than other things, but like the booklets they're tiny. They're not really the same as like it's almost like you're holding like a big book, So I don't know. That gets into that whole physical media versus digital media discussion, which both are valid forms, but vinyl is very much its own unique experience, and one that I really, really just I love doing. And for me, it's over the years, I've wished I'd done it more, but probably I stream a lot more music just due to the convenience of it, So.
And before we talk about streaming, for the record, same. I mean, I listen to Apple Music.
Yeah.
Way more than vinyl, and that's just simply because I have 350 something records in my collection, which I'm really proud of my collection, don't get me wrong, but it does not reflect my overall musical taste, right? As you would probably say about yourself too.
And especially discovering music, right? I mean, So go ahead. You
mentioned the tactile nature of owning a vinyl record, and that's such a great point, because you're absolutely right. There is something to be said when you're listening to an album on vinyl. There are times where, if I am fortunate that there are lyric sheets to said record, sometimes I just want to dissect the words. I want to really listen to the words, and I want to follow along. Sometimes I might karaoke and sing along. It just depends on my mood. But also, make no mistake, this is art. And I alluded to it being an investment, vinyl collecting being an investment. Purchasing vinyl records is an investment. So for me, and I think you would agree with this, going back to, I make it a point to not do anything else but listen to my records. Vinyl records are not cheap. Let's be real here, whether they're used or new. So see it as, how could anyone in their right mind spend $25 on an album where you can listen to it free if you pay however much Spotify and Apple Music are per month, but you're spending $25 on an album. At the very least, don't you want to get your money's worth?
Yeah.
And I don't know, just to me, part of that entails of really just that album and spending time on just the music and ditching your phone. Like I said, my phone is on my desk when I'm sitting on my, as I like to call it, my record listening couch over here. It's just one of those things I've never been able to wrap my head around necessarily, but I don't know, that's just how I feel. And like I said, even if it's not following along the lyrics, I just love sometimes, like I was referencing the Alice Coltrane album I was talking about earlier in the episode, sometimes I just love to stare at album artwork while I'm listening to music. I literally just stare at it, and it's in my hand. Like, maybe I'll flip it around, whatever, but there's just something about, again, that tactile nature of holding this piece of art, because that's another thing. Forget about the music. Album covers.
Yeah.
Artwork in of itself. There's just something about staring at an album cover and you're listening to music, and it's almost like, how do these two things go together?
Yeah. I'm looking, you got Fragile there, Roger Dean, right? I mean, look at the stuff that he does.
Great example of that, right?
Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's so
Great
many
record,
much amazing album artwork, and even with like CDs, CDs you get like an eighth of the size, so you still get the album artwork, and it's even smaller on your phone, so you can see it, but you can't really appreciate, it's like you're holding a painting, right? So.
Absolutely.
What about other forms? So we got streaming. Is there anything else? Is there any other ways are you pretty much vinyl and streaming these days, or is there anything else? I mean, I know for me, like I've been listening to my iPod again recently a lot.
So yes, it is primarily vinyl and streaming. I will say, and I've said this to you before, I will occasionally still purchase CDs. Two reasons for that. One, there are still certain records that you just cannot find on streaming.
Yeah, that's true.
So there's that. But also, I'm one of those neurotic music nerds where I worry that be off streaming tomorrow, and then I'm like, what do I do?
Yeah.
What do I do? For a really great example for that is I'm really into this Japanese band called Fishmans, and this is one of my favorite albums. This is my favorite by them, one of my favorite albums. And while this one is on streaming, this is a case where I worry it could be off tomorrow. So having that, at least the CD copy, and being able to rip it onto my computer and then add it to my iCloud so I can still listen to it on Apple Music, I have a backup.
Yeah.
So that's where CDs, for me, are of value. Do I listen to CDs? No, not really. It's something that, with my current setup, I probably should, because I will say that if we're going to talk about sound quality, CD quality is still better.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can't really beat CD quality. Yeah.
You can't. And, not for nothing, there are certain albums versus CD. I don't want to hear hisses. I have Aphex Twin's Selected Ambient Works on vinyl, and while it sounds great on vinyl, like, it sounds really good,
you want it as clean.
That's a record, the way it was produced, which was produced digitally, I don't want to hear cracks. It takes me out of it a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's an instance where I feel that record does justice when you do listen to it on CD, or even streaming for that matter as well, too.
Yeah, I would agree with that there's definitely albums that, that's one thing I really appreciate about, the digital age as a whole is you can't deny how good quality some sounding a lot of albums are, and even what they're doing with older albums. As much as I love, the old, crackly thing too, we've talked about like Steven Wilson's remixes, we've talked about remasters of different albums and everything. Like, what they're able to do now technically is unbelievable. I mean, sonically, some of these albums are just sounding better than ever, including stuff recorded 50 years ago, So, I mean, for me, I would say probably streaming is the most convenient thing. I do like to, when I am streaming though, you can't really do it out and about, but when I'm home, I like to be on the Wi-Fi, so I have like the best quality connection, and I have the quality setting on Spotify set like to max, So I don't want any kind of, like, I hate when, especially if you're out and about and you're listening, sometimes the quality will dip a little bit. That drives me crazy. That's one thing I really don't like about streaming, but for the most part, I'd say like it's the complaints are fairly minute. I mean, unless you have really, really bad quality, and then there's always the option to download it to your phone if you if you're like, okay, I want to be able to listen to this on the go, but I don't want the potentially the quality to be compromised. You can just download it straight to your phone, which helps. But I don't know. Streaming has a lot of advantages. It's undeniable.
And that's the thing. You can't deny it, like you said, and it kind of puts you in this awkward position where I have such a disdain with these streaming services, Spotify specifically, with how artists are compensated. So it puts you in this weird predicament where it's like, morally, I don't want to subscribe to this. I don't want to rely and support this platform. But you just cannot deny the convenience.
Well, the thing is, it's not great for the artist, but it's phenomenal for the consumer.
For the consumer.
So, and we are all consumers. So it's like, well, there's no better way to discover music, like, well, maybe that's not true. I mean, like the Rate Your Music days when I would find stuff online and people recommending you stuff is also wonderful. But I mean, you can't deny Spotify. It's like, if you like this artist, listen to this, or if you they'll put a playlist together and recommend you new songs, and you'll find new songs that way, or just like everything, recommend new releases and stuff, and it's like, can't say I dislike that.
I can't either. I mean, we would both be lying
Yeah.
if, otherwise. And, as music enthusiasts like you and I, we have this desire to always explore
Yeah.
and discover new music, whether it's old or new, that's irrelevant. But to have the ability in the palm of your hand to pull up anything, I would not be into 2/3 of the music that I listen to if it weren't for streaming. There are records in my collection. They would never be in my collection if I didn't have the ability to listen to it for the first time on streaming.
Yep.
With streaming, I want to go back to what we were discussing with vinyl about how you listen to a record on streaming. So similar to you, I use Apple Music, and I mainly do that because with Apple Music, you have the ability to stream things in FLAC. So from a digital perspective, FLAC is going to be the closest source to the original recording. I like to refer to myself as a budget audiophile, and what I mean by that, again, I showed you my $70 AKGs that I've been using for 15 years or so. But I have a portable DAC that I use too, which allows me, just because I have it set on Apple Music to listen to FLAC, doesn't mean it's going to play in FLAC unless you have a DAC that goes along with it, digital audio converter. And so having that and being able to have the ability to listen to music in FLAC, it's the closest to incredible sound quality that I'm going to have next to, CD, Blu-rays, and vinyl, of course. I do tend to download albums offline because, like you were saying, I take the album listening experience so seriously that I don't like interruptions. And I get very disgruntled, especially in the car, if there's any network or, I don't use Bluetooth for the most part, Bluetooth interference. I want no interruptions, and my wife will be the first to tell you that because she'll try to tell me something, and I'll have headphones and I'm like listening. So I just take it so seriously because it means that much.
Well,
to
you're
me.
obviously passionate about it, right? I mean, I would say for me, for sure. When it comes, one thing I gotta say I love about the car, and recently my job is I'm afforded a lot of time to listen to music. So that's brought me back to this iPod because I don't have Bluetooth in my car, and my phone doesn't have a headphone jack because they apparently don't have headphone jacks anymore. It's all Bluetooth. So my iPod, short of listening to the radio or CDs, it has my iPod is really the only thing I can use because I have a USB connection in the car. So I've been listening to my iPod a lot more, which has been great because it kind of has brought me back about 10 years. Because in a way, it's like, I mean, it's still really a lot more convenient than vinyl or CD, but you're still sort of forced to, instead of just kind of, clicking around with Spotify or something or Apple Music, whatever, I still will just put on an album in the car. It's like, I'll just let it play through, and rather than like trying to navigate, and it's a pain in the ass on the stereo that I got in the car. But honestly, driving in the car is like one of my favorite ways of listening to music. I don't know what it is. I mean, I don't know if they're just getting better at making, having good sound systems in cars, but I just turn it up loud. It drowns out everything, and I've actually had some pretty immersive experiences with albums while driving, especially if you're driving a long distance and you're just kind of zoned out on the road. There's really nothing to think about, and you just listen to music. It's pretty great. But my iPod, it's been kind of fun going back into it, and I've been putting music on it again and listening to a lot of stuff that way. And then the other thing that's kind of cool about the iPod is that unlike something like streaming service. I mean, I know you can follow and save stuff, but what's cool about the iPod is like you scroll through your artists, and I'll scroll through artists and be like, oh my god, I forgot about this, you know, and then I'll play it. I'll like see an artist and think of an album or whatever, and or sometimes I'll throw it on shuffle, and an artist will come up and be like, oh my god, I just forgot all about them because either it wasn't recommended to me or I just forgot to maybe search for the artist. So that's another kind of cool, different way to listen to music. Took me back about 10 years.
Yeah, first of all, I'm jealous that you still have an iPod, let alone a functioning iPod.
Yeah.
You want to talk about a medium that we so took advantage of in the 2000s and is obsolete.
Oh, like, totally obsolete.
You didn't see that coming if you told me that 20 years ago, right? But you brought up something interesting about the car, and I do find that driving, I do a lot of driving and a lot of long distance commuting as well too with my job, and I do take advantage of that, especially when I have clients that I'm meeting out 45, 50 minutes away. I'm like, well, that's an album right there. That is an album.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I appreciate, and it's kind of the closest next to a vinyl record where I can, for the most part, immerse myself. You know, you're driving, right? You're not doing anything else other than that. And I also, with listening to music in the car, I find the car, for me at least, is a great way to listen to an album for the first time.
I agree.
Because I'm not fully attentive like I would be listening to a record, but there's just something about just sporadically picking things up and like making a mental note of this instrumental passage or this really cool production technique or this lyrical line, whatever you may have it, and then eventually I will sit down and stream it, or if I have it on vinyl, listen to it on vinyl. So I do appreciate listening to music to the car. And still to this day, you and I have fond memories.
Oh my God! Yeah.
Listening to albums.
That could be a
in
whole
the car.
episode.
Absolutely can be. One other thing I just wanted to talk about with streaming is going back to that. So I told you with records, my rule is I don't do anything else. I give myself a little more flexibility when I'm listening to music and albums on my iPad. So I use my iPad is my primary means to stream my music. I have my DAC. I listen to it in FLAC. I will listen to records on the iPad. I put my Do Not Disturb on, so I'm not receiving notifications, and I'll immerse myself that way sometimes. But I tend to multitask. Sometimes there will be instances it's background music. Sometimes I have my headphones on and I'm listening to a record on my iPad, and I'm gaming. The TV's muted, but I'm like immersing myself in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, but listening to music that I feel just vibes with the game I'm playing. Sometimes for reading, there are certain albums that are go-to albums for me. Sometimes when I'm in a product.
Yeah.
What's that?
With reading, for the most part, I don't, but some instrumental music.
Yep.
You know, yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it depends. Like I'm not blasting Maggot Brain by Funkadelic while I'm trying to read, but something like Kind of Blue by Miles Davis works great in that setting. Select Ambient works too. I referenced that album, Apex Twin. But sometimes if I'm in like a productivity mode where I really need to get something work related done, I have this Killer Ellis Coltrane playlist I made a while back, and so I'll put that on, and that just works for me. I'll listen to that while working, house chores, you name it. Another favorite way of listening to music is both the gym and going on walks. Some of my favorite immersive experiences have been just going on a walk. And while you do compromise with sound quality, I typically use AirPods for that. You make up for the ambience as far as wherever your environment is, and I think there's something to be said about that too. And there's still that you're doing nothing else but walking, and you're just kind of taking in your environment. And I love trying to correlate that with whatever the record is I'm listening.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say it kind of shapes. Like if you're at the gym, you're not gonna be listening to, Nick Drake. You want to listen to like the Who or something. You're gonna want to listen to something really, that gets you pumped up, right? You're not going to want to
Yeah.
hear some mellow stuff. But likewise, you go on a walk, you're not going to want to hear Metallica. You're going to want to hear, maybe something instrumental, something light. I mean, I suppose it depends. It also goes back to even like seasonal listening, like what we were talking about with our last episode. But that goes like with the different mediums, like with streaming, you can basically listen to music anywhere, so you can kind of color your life with music catered to what you're doing, which is kind of cool.
Absolutely.
That's another benefit of
Absolutely.
streaming, and plus playlists even. I mean, I find I make so many playlists, I'm definitely more of a albums guy where I want to hear the record, but I love playlists too, man. I mean, sometimes you get in a casual mood where you're just like, I want to hear good tunes, I want to hear a bunch of really good tunes that I love, I'm going to make a playlist. Or you get like a theme, you have fun with it, and you just, maybe you want some kind of, like we were talking about the gym, a workout playlist, or you want to, you just need something to pass the time really quickly. Say, like for me, like I'm at work, and it's like, I just want the last hour to go by. Put on like an hour's worth of really great tunes, and it's like that, So, it's another way streaming sort of changed the game. It started with with iPods, playlist making, but streaming's taken it to a whole different level. Especially with a lot of streaming services catering playlists to your tastes. You don't even have to make them anymore if you don't want to.
Yeah, that's a point. That's I have mixed feelings about that. That could also be a conversation for
I do too. Yeah,
but I will just final thoughts that I have before we wrap this conversation up. And of course, if you have any more thoughts, please. Something that I've been bringing up throughout this conversation is environment. Environment very much plays a very key factor with the listening experience. Literally today, I had a scenario. So my job, I'm on the road, I'm on the go. So it's required that I have my AirPods and my Bose headphones with me. They serve different things. I'm not going to get into that. But today I had a cancellation for a client, so I had plenty of time to kill. So I went to a local Starbucks, got myself some coffee, put my Bose on, and I just sat there and listened to the White Album in its entirety while just sitting there drinking my coffee, and not to sound creepy, but people watching.
Yeah.
There's just something about just, whether it's sitting in a coffee shop or taking a walk in the park or you name it, I really do feel that environment can really play a key factor as far as the listening experience goes.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even just down to night and day, right? I mean, I'll listen to certain albums at night more than I would
and weather for that matter too.
Yeah, weather, all that stuff, season.
Something to be said about a rainy day.
Yeah, for sure. Okay.
But do you have any final thoughts about this? This was a great discussion. Do you have any final thoughts you wanna throw in there before we do our last segment?
Do we have any final thoughts? I don't think so. I think that really all forms of listening to music is valid, and I think that each experience offers something different. So it's nice that we pretty much in 2024 have every possible means to listen to music, and really we're lucky we have access to more music than ever before and at our fingertips. So it's pretty incredible time to be alive and listening to music and discovering.
We're very lucky to absolutely. We're very lucky to have that ability to do so, and I for one do not take it for granted.
Okay, so for the last segment, we're gonna do an record roulette, which basically is us picking 3 random records from our collection, and we're gonna talk about them real quick. So I'll let Andy go first. Again,
I'm going first. Okay, so I had grabbed 5 initially.
Mm-hmm.
I did pull them randomly, so since we're only doing 3, I'm gonna look at my 5 and decide which ones I am going to talk about. Ooh, okay. These are interesting choices. All right, so the first one. Oh, I'm so glad I pulled this one. Actually, the world needs to know more about this album. Gene Clark, no other. Gene Clark, if you don't know who he is, he was a original member of the Byrds. The Byrds are one of my favorite 60s bands. Gene Clark had a you could say, both a tragic career and a tragic life in general. He left the Byrds after 5D, Fifth Dimension, and went on to put on incredible solo albums. In the early 70s, David Geffen had set up a original Byrds lineup reunion, and they did an album and everything. Crosby was back, Gene was back. It's an okay record, but the best songs, like the first three Byrds albums, are Gene Clark's songs. So that record didn't do well, but the critical acclaim was his songs, so it gave him an opportunity to put out this really produced album, No Other. Best way I can describe No Other, first of all, way ahead of its time. This is the country dark side of the moon.
Interesting.
You've got country, you've got psychedelia, there's some funk here, there's even gospel. This record, Graham Parsons, who I'm also a big fan of, was also in the Byrds briefly, may have coined and came up with cosmic American music, which is just psychedelic country rock, but Gene Clark perfected it on this record. This is one of those cult records. It got re-released on 4AD Records a few years ago. I got the CD originally, and a year later the vinyl copy. So I have both versions of that on CD and vinyl. I love this album. This is my second favorite album, released in 1974. I love this album cover. You need to check this album out. It is so good.
Nice. Great
guitar playing. Gene Clark, the GOAT, no other.
All right, I'm going to pick a random one I didn't pre-pick, so we'll go from this pile. They're alphabetized, so I kind of vaguely know this is between A and D. Let's go with this one. What do we pull out here? Oh, wow, this is my most recent purchase. Cool. I just listened to this. The Cars.
Great album.
Found this at a place called Value Village here in Canada. Bought this for like $8, I think. I don't know how I didn't own this on vinyl before. This was like one of the very first albums I ever listened to. Funny enough, I mean, I guess you could say this is almost like the Cars would represent almost like sort of the roots of my roots in music. I was in the womb and my parents went and saw a Cars concert. Apparently, so, and this is also one of the first albums that I ever listened to in its entirety. So, I don't know what to say about this album. It's a classic record, man. I mean, every song
might as well be their greatest hits.
Yeah, it might as well be It might as well be their greatest hits. There's a couple songs missing, but I mean, for the most part, all these songs are great. Just What I Needed, Best Friend's Girl. I love Moving in Stereo. That's a fantastic song.
Great song.
Yeah, I don't know. This is like one of those records that screams classic rock, and it's just like one of those timeless albums. I don't know, and one of the greatest debut albums of all time. So I don't know, if you haven't heard this album, what are you doing? It's
seriously
a classic for a reason. Cool.
Kasich, man.
Cool pick.
Great poll.
Yeah.
Great Roulette poll.
Yeah.
All right, so this is one you will appreciate. Love this album cover. It's a little creepy. Peter Gabriel 4.
Ooh,
Security.
Very nice.
What this one was called. Yeah, I mean, this one definitely, he started experimenting with world music with Peter Gabriel 3, aka Melt, and he just takes it further sonically on this record. I believe Shock the Monkeys on this album. This is one of those ones that's this was a grower for me. Unlike Melt, this was one that I had a really difficult time getting into for a number of years. That's no longer the case, of course. This is up there amongst some of my favorite Peter Gabriel releases. And yeah, this record's great. I mean, it doesn't sound like anything released in the early 1980s. And it's interesting going from this album to a few later, going to So, which was his most commercial record up to that point, which is also a really fantastic album. But when you just compare that to this, it's just such an interesting juxtaposition and transition, for that matter. So
such a cool
Security
period. Such a cool period for him. I know that one probably less than the other ones, but from what I've listened to, I've really enjoyed it. So
nice.
We're going between, I think, I want to say it's like M and P. So let's see what we got here. Let's try this guy. If I can get it out. Oh, the bass is in the way. Oh, no, I can't pick that one. It was Dark Side of the Moon.
Yeah, I don't think you need to talk about
I'm
that
gonna
album
change.
anymore.
Hold on. Give me just a second. My bass is in the way. Oh, it's Wish You Were Here.
You just had a whole Pink Floyd record.
Okay. I don't know. It's Wish You Were Here, man. It's I guess
What
I've
do you
talked a
think
lot
so?
about Dark Side. I haven't really talked a lot about Wish You Were Here. I mean, this is probably my second favorite Floyd album, I would say. I don't know. I have a big personal attachment with this album. Especially, I lost my dad last year, and he was like a massive Pink Floyd fan and got me into Pink Floyd, and some of these songs are actually really hard to listen to now. But nevertheless, it's a masterpiece. On the same level, really, I would say, as Dark. I mean, we all know. Come on, I mean, it's that classic Floyd period. This is pretty much as good as they got, and each song is fantastic. I love "Shine on You, Crazy Diamond," both parts, and just a record that I really have a lot of a personal attachment to. I think it's well produced. All the songs are great. This was really the last album with Floyd working together as a unit before it kind of became sort of the Roger Waters-led thing until it became the David Gilmour-led thing. But to me, they were always at their best when they worked together as a unit. Except for maybe Animals, that's a masterpiece, but, I digress.
Agreed. Yeah, that album, interesting enough, and I won't share the story, of course, but that album I actually associate with your dad as well. You may recall the reason why, but
yeah. I do. Yeah.
Anyways, great record.
Yep.
So my last pick is a great record too. Just got this not too long ago. Fresh by Sly and the Family Stone.
Ooh, I love that.
Look at that orange.
Ooh,
orange.
I love that.
Some of the stuff I have original pressings of. Anyways, so this was the record that he put out after There's a Riot Going On, which is my favorite Sly and Family Stone album. I would say overall this is the last classic Sly record. He would go on to put out okay records, some of which would have like 2 solid tracks. But this really is the last great one, and it very much sonically continues what he was doing on There's a Riot Going On, but also kind of from a songwriting perspective goes back to what he did on records like Life and Stand. So it's an interesting kind of culmination of everything up to this point. I just recently finished reading his autobiography that came out not too long ago. So it was a great read. I'm a huge Sly Stone fan, a very complicated individual indeed. But yeah, this is just a great record. It's so much fun, and look at that album cover, man.
The album looks fun, When I see that cover, that looks like a good time.
Fun, but it's it's experimental, but in a very accessible way, and yeah, I mean this period of Sly, you just can't go wrong.
I've liked everything I've heard by them. I just never dug into them, so that's another one. It's too many artists,
Oh, I know. The list is endless.
My last one's gonna be between, I think it's D or E and L. So let's see what we got here. Okay, let's see what we got here. It's a Jimi Hendrix Greatest Hits, which it's almost a crime to own, I guess. But Hendrix vinyl's hard to find unless you get reissue. Although I do own a copy of Electric Ladyland, which I found, which is great. I suppose I could just talk about Hendrix. I mean, he's Hendrix. I mean, he just a total masterclass. I think everything he did. You've talked about this before, and I kind of agree. I mean, I think he did some amazing stuff in the 60s, but I would have loved to have seen where he went in the 70s. He was sadly cut, his life was cut short, and you know, we didn't really get to, I think, see him to his full potential. But I mean, what we got on here? Purple Haze, Fire, The Wind Cries Mary, Can You See Me, Hey Joe, Stone Free, Manic Depression, Foxy Lady. Oh yeah, it's definitely his hits. Crosstown Traffic, All Along the Watchtower, Red House, Remember. Yeah.
It's probably a great way to start with him.
Yeah, this would be a great one to start with. I think this was the only Hendrix album I owned for a while before I got Electric Ladyland. So I meant to keep... randomly, Walmart had a reissue of Are You Experienced like a year or two ago. And it was like really cheap. I wish I had picked that up, but I never did. But yeah, I don't know, man. It's Jimmy. I don't know what to say with a greatest hits album, you know? These are all great songs. We've all heard them before. I will say All Along the Watchtower is one of those songs that, you know, I mean, I very, very rarely listen to classic rock radio, but it's one of those songs that I never get sick of. I've heard it a bunch, but man, that solo, fantastic. And just his like, that's his song, in my opinion, you know? Like,
agreed.
And I like Bob Dylan's version too, but he just made it his own, so yeah. Jimi Hendrix is not Jimi Hendrix or the Jimi Hendrix Experience is not a greatest hits band.
That's no, definitely not. But that comp, I will say, is a great way to potentially start out with Hendrix if you're not familiar with him.
If you're like a 15-year-old who's never heard Hendrix before, who's for some reason watching this, go pick that up.
You will find it at your local Walmart. That's for sure.
Well, there you go. That's 3 records from our collection that we got to randomly talk about. I kind of like that segment because we're kind of forced to go off the cuff, you know.
Off the cusp, yeah.
But yeah, any other final thoughts you wanted to give in terms of this episode? So we're basically planning, I guess, to do the Krautrock episode next, hopefully. So
that is the plan. Yeah. You know, in terms of final thoughts, this was a great discussion. These are discussions that I love having when we're talking music specifically. I will just say, check us out, guys. I will famously promote that between this episode and episode 4 of our podcast, I should have my top 10 favorite albums released in 1968 at the time of this recording. I'll be recording that Friday.
I really look forward to
I don't know if you will be doing other things, but
possibly.
I have other ideas on the channel that I hope to actually see through.
Yeah,
Stay
absolutely.
tuned.
And for those of you listening in podcast land, check us out on YouTube if you want to see some other content that we've done. And yeah, for those in YouTube land, check out our podcasts. And thanks for all the support. It's been great getting lots of nice comments and likes and subscribers and all those things. And we're on, I think, all the social media now, at least Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, or whatever they call it these days. And yeah, we will see you hopefully next month, right?
On all that stuff, we'll see you in a month. Check us out for, when we continue to put out solo content. Most of our videos we do on podcasts. This, of course, this is a podcast, so you'll find that on all podcasts. Mm-hmm. And yeah, guys, just like, subscribe, and I'll end with type in the comments below who has the cooler band tee. Spoiler alert, it's me.
And also comment on who has the better beard. I think it's you. You know, this is keep me warm in the winter beard.
2 for 2. I win. You're a loser. And till next time.
The thing is, you're committed to the beard. You've had the beard a long time. I'm committed to the
I'm
beard.
trying to end this episode, man.
So, yeah. All right. Goodbye, everybody. Peace.